"We need your credit cards, Riley. All of them, now." Those were the exact, demanding words my mother, Eleanor, hissed at me, her voice trembling with a mixture of absolute panic and unyielding entitlement. We were standing inside the Grand Orchid Bridal Suite of the Magnolia Coastal Estate, one of the most exclusive, breathtakingly expensive luxury wedding venues in the state. Outside the heavy oak doors, 200 of the city's most elite socialites, doctors, and finance bros were sipping top-shelf champagne under crystal chandeliers, waiting for a lavish 5-course filet mignon dinner to be served. But inside the suite, the flawless illusion of my family's immense wealth was violently crashing down. Sitting on a velvet chaise lounge in the corner was my older brother, Jason. The untouchable golden child, the supposed crypto day trading genius, was sweating profusely through his custom-tailored tuxedo, his head buried in his hands. Standing opposite my parents was the venue's stern hospitality director, Marcus, holding a tablet and flanked by 2 massive security guards. "I don't know how else to explain this to you, folks," Marcus said, his voice entirely devoid of sympathy. "The final 3 cashier's checks Mr. Jason submitted for the venue, the catering, and the open bar have all bounced. Insufficient funds. That is a remaining balance of $150,000. If a valid form of payment is not provided in the next 10 minutes, I am instructing my staff to pack up the food, cut the music, and ask your guests to vacate the premises." My father's face turned a dangerous, volatile shade of crimson. He turned to me, his eyes wide with a frantic, wild desperation. They had invited me to this wedding as a complete afterthought, seating me at a back table near the kitchen doors. To them, I was just Riley, the disappointment. The struggling freelance designer who lived in a tiny apartment, drove a beat-up car, and couldn't afford a flashy lifestyle. They hadn't spoken to me in months, but the moment their golden child's house of cards collapsed, they expected me to be their human shield. "Did you hear him, Riley?" My father barked, snapping his fingers in my face as if I were a disobedient dog. "Empty your purse. Give Marcus your credit cards." I stared at him, genuinely stunned by the sheer, psychotic audacity of the request. "You want me to put $150,000 of Jason's debt on my personal credit cards?" "Oh, stop being so dramatic," my mother snapped, grabbing my arm. "Jason's assets are just temporarily frozen because of a market dip. We will pay you back next week. You don't even have a mortgage, Riley. You just draw pictures on a laptop all day. You have the credit limit. Family helps family. If you don't do this, Jason's new in-laws are going to find out he's broke, and the bride will cancel the wedding." Family helps family. I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I looked at the 3 of them. I looked at the parents who, exactly 8 years ago, had secretly drained my entire life savings to bail this exact same brother out of jail, before throwing me out into a freezing rainstorm on my 20th birthday and telling me I was no longer their daughter. I had slept in my car. I had starved. I had rebuilt my entire existence from the absolute bottom of the barrel while they popped champagne and celebrated Jason's fake success. And now, they expected me to bleed for them all over again. I slowly unlatched my small designer clutch. My mother let out a heavy sigh of relief, expecting me to pull out a silver Visa card and plunge myself into a lifetime of crippling debt to save their precious public image. Instead, I reached inside and pulled out a sleek, heavy black keycard engraved with the Magnolia Coastal Estate's gold crest. I didn't hand it to my father. I held it up, looking directly at the venue director. "Marcus," I said, my voice ringing out cold, authoritative, and crystal clear in the silent room. The stern venue director immediately straightened his posture, respectfully clasping his hands behind his back. "Yes, Ms. Riley. Instruct the kitchen staff to pack up the food and donate it to the downtown shelter," I commanded, my eyes locking onto my father's horrified face. "Cut the power to the ballroom, and have security escort the groom and his family off my property immediately." My brother Jason finally looked up, his jaw dropping so far it practically hit the floor. "Your property? Riley, what the hell are you talking about? You don't work here." I smiled, It was a cold, sharp, and utterly merciless smile. "No, Jason," I whispered softly. "I own it." Before I reveal exactly how I built a multi-million-dollar hospitality empire in the shadows, exposed my toxic family's massive financial frauds to 200 elite guests, and legally kicked my own brother out of his $150,000 wedding, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. But only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I love seeing our amazing community from all over the world. Also, I have a question for you. What would you have done if your parents demanded you empty your bank accounts to save the sibling who ruined your life? Let's talk about it in the comments below. To understand how I could look my own flesh and blood in the eye, clutching a master keycard to a multi-million-dollar estate, and coldly order security to throw them out onto the street, I need to take you back exactly 8 years. I need to pull back the curtain on the flawless, manicured illusion of the Sterling family and show you the suffocating reality of what it actually meant to be their daughter. In our household, the dynamic wasn't just a subtle preference. It was a loud, undeniable religion, and my older brother, Jason, was its undisputed god. From the moment I was old enough to comprehend the value of a dollar, the dividing line between Jason and me was violently clear. My parents, Arthur and Alina, operated a highly lucrative corporate insurance firm. We lived in a sprawling, pristine McMansion in the affluent suburbs of Seattle. Wealth was never an issue, unless it came to me. Jason was 3 years older, boisterous, athletic, and possessed a manipulative, effortless charm that my parents completely worshipped. He was the legacy. I was the quiet, observant afterthought, a girl who preferred sketchpads and design software to country club mixers. My parents didn't just overlook me, they actively resented my independence. The blatant financial favoritism crystallized into outright cruelty during my senior year of high school. Jason had barely scraped together a C average, yet my parents proudly wrote a blank check for his out-of-state tuition at a prestigious private university. For his high school graduation, they threw a massive catered party and surprised him with a brand-new $60,000 lifted Ford Raptor truck, complete with a giant red bow on the windshield. When my turn came, the rules suddenly changed. I had worked tirelessly, securing a 3.9 GPA and earning an acceptance letter to one of the top commercial design programs in the country. I remember sitting at our polished granite kitchen island, proudly sliding my acceptance letter and the tuition breakdown toward my father. I wasn't asking for a full ride or a new car. I just asked if they could help me cover the first semester's room and board while I looked for a job on campus. Arthur didn't even pick up the paper. He took a slow sip of his black coffee, looked me dead in the eye, and delivered a speech that would haunt me for years. "We are not throwing our hard-earned money at an art degree, Riley," my father said, his voice dripping with condescending finality. "Jason's business degree is an investment in this family's future. You drawing pictures on a computer is a hobby. If you want to go to a fancy school, you need to learn the value of a dollar. You can enroll at the local community college and pay for it yourself. We are done handing out free rides." There had never been a free ride for me, but I swallowed the burning lump in my throat and nodded. I withdrew my university acceptance the next morning. While Jason was living a fully funded frat boy fantasy, swiping my father's platinum credit card for ski trips, VIP table service, and designer clothes, I was plunging into a grueling, bone-crushing grind. I enrolled in community college and took a job working double shifts at a local 24-hour diner. My life became a suffocating loop of exhaustion. I woke up at 4:00 a.m. to open the diner, smelling constantly of stale coffee, grease, and industrial bleach. My feet ached so badly by the end of my shifts that I would sit in my beat-up, second-hand Honda Civic and cry before driving to my evening classes. I wore threadbare thrift store clothes and lived on day-old bagels and instant noodles. But through the blood, sweat, and absolute misery of those 2 years, I did something incredible. Every single tip, every overtime hour, every skipped meal went into a high-yield savings account. By the week of my 20th birthday, I had miraculously saved $22,500. It was enough to finally transfer to the university of my dreams. That money wasn't just a number on a screen, it was my literal blood. It was my freedom. Because I had opened the account when I was 16, my father was legally required to be listed as a joint custodian, a minor administrative detail I had completely forgotten about. It was the fatal mistake that would destroy my life. The nightmare began on a Tuesday evening in November, exactly 2 days before my 20th birthday. A torrential, freezing rainstorm was hammering the Pacific Northwest. I was pulling a double shift at the diner when my phone began vibrating frantically in my apron pocket. It was my mother. When I answered, she wasn't calling to wish me an early happy birthday. She was hysterical. Jason had been arrested. Driving recklessly under the influence, he had lost control of his beloved Ford Raptor and crashed it straight through the storefront of a local jewelry boutique. By some miracle, no one was hurt, but the damage was catastrophic. Between the bail, the immediate legal retainers, and the massive out-of-court civil settlement demanded by the boutique owner to avoid pressing felony charges, Jason needed $20,000 in liquid cash by the next morning. My parents' assets were temporarily tied up in an escrow account for a new vacation home. They were panicking. I told my mother I was sorry, but I was at work and couldn't help. I hung up the phone, completely unaware that they had already found their solution. The next morning, I woke up early. It was finally time. I logged into my university portal, ready to pay my massive transfer deposit and secure my future. I pulled up my online banking app to verify the routing numbers. When the screen loaded, the air was violently sucked out of my lungs. Available balance, $0. My hands started to shake violently. I frantically refreshed the page. I called the bank's automated line, my heart pounding so hard it hurt my ribs. The automated voice confirmed the horrifying truth. At 8:00 a.m. that morning, an in-person withdrawal of $22,500 had been authorized by Arthur Sterling. Blind panic and a sickening, primal dread washed over me. I sprinted out to my car and drove through the pouring rain to my parents' house, breaking every speed limit. I burst through the heavy front doors, completely soaked, my diner uniform clinging to my skin. I found them in the living room. My father was calmly reviewing legal documents. My mother was rubbing Jason's back as he sat on the plush velvet sofa, nursing a hangover and sipping a green smoothie. He didn't even have a scratch on him. "Where is it?" I screamed, my voice cracking wildly as tears of pure betrayal streamed down my face. "Where is my money?" My father slowly looked up, his expression entirely devoid of guilt. "Lower your voice in this house, Riley. You emptied my account." I sobbed, pointing a shaking finger at him. "That was my tuition. That was 3 years of my life. You stole $22,000 from me." "We didn't steal anything," my mother snapped, standing up and glaring at me as if I had done something wrong. "Your brother made a terrible mistake. He was facing real jail time, Riley. We needed liquid cash immediately to settle with the store owner before they went to the press. That account has your father's name on it, which means he had every legal right to withdraw those funds." I stared at her, completely paralyzed by the sheer, psychotic audacity of her justification. "You used my college fund to bail him out of a DUI. I scrubbed floors for 3 years. You buy him a $60,000 truck, pay his rent, fund his entire life, and when he commits a crime, you steal from me to fix it. Family helps family." My mother yelled, her face turning red. "You are acting like a selfish, ungrateful child. Jason's future was on the line." "What about my future?" I screamed back, the years of suppressed rage finally breaking through. "I was transferring next week. I earned that money. You are going to put it back right now, or I swear to God, I am calling the police and reporting you for theft." The room fell deathly silent. Jason finally looked up from his smoothie, rolling his eyes in exaggerated annoyance. "God, Riley, chill out. It's just money. Dad said he'll pay you back eventually." But my father's face had morphed into something entirely monstrous. The mask of the civilized, wealthy patriarch completely disintegrated. His eyes darkened with an explosive, venomous fury. He marched across the room, his heavy footsteps thudding against the hardwood. Before I could react, he grabbed my arm with a crushing, violent grip and dragged me toward the front door. "Dad, stop. You're hurting me." I cried out, struggling against his grip. "You want to act like a hostile stranger in my home," he roared, dragging me into the foyer. "You want to threaten your own family with the police over a technicality. You have always been a selfish parasite, Riley. You contribute nothing to this family but complaints and drama." He threw open the heavy front doors. The freezing, torrential rain whipped into the entryway. With one final, violent shove, he threw me out onto the concrete porch. I stumbled and fell hard onto my hands and knees, the cold rain instantly soaking me to the bone. "Arthur, her things." My mother called out from behind him. A moment later, my cheap, canvas duffel bag was tossed out the door, landing in a puddle next to me. "You turn 20 tomorrow," my father sneered, standing in the doorway like a towering executioner, looking down at me with absolutely zero parental affection. He looked at me the way you look at an infestation. "You are legally an adult. You want to call the cops. Do it from the street. You are officially evicted. I no longer have a daughter." He slammed the door shut. The heavy deadbolt engaged with a loud, final click. I sat on the freezing concrete porch in the pouring rain, staring at the closed mahogany door. I had $0. I had no home. I had been entirely erased. They had completely sacrificed my existence, my literal blood and sweat, just to sweep their golden child's crimes under the rug. But as I sat there, shivering uncontrollably in the storm, the hysterical panic slowly began to drain out of my body. It was replaced by something cold, heavy, and absolutely unbreakable. They thought they had destroyed me. They thought that without their money and their roof, I would simply vanish into obscurity, a necessary casualty for Jason's success. They had absolutely no idea that throwing me into that storm was the exact moment the scapegoat died, and the architect of their future destruction was born. The first night after your own family completely erases you is a very specific, paralyzing kind of cold. When the heavy mahogany door of my parents' house slammed shut, sealing my fate and taking my $22,500 life savings with it, I didn't have a cinematic breakdown. I didn't scream at the sky. I simply picked up my soaking wet canvas duffel bag, walked 2 miles in the freezing, torrential rain, and climbed into my beat-up, second-hand Honda Civic. I had no credit cards. I had exactly $12.40 in my wallet from my last diner shift. I drove blindly until I found a deserted strip mall parking lot on the edge of town, killed the engine to save gas, and curled into a ball in the backseat, pulling my damp winter coat over my head. I shivered so violently that my teeth literally cracked. I was 20 years old, and my parents had sacrificed my entire existence to ensure my brother didn't have to face the consequences of his own crimes. That was the exact night I met Clara. At 5:00 a.m. A sharp rap on my foggy car window jolted me awake. I sat up, terrified, expecting the police. Instead, peering through the glass was a 65-year-old woman holding a steaming cup of coffee. Clara was the owner of the small, independent cafe at the end of the strip mall. But more importantly, before she retired to run a quiet bakery, Clara had been a cutthroat, highly successful commercial real estate mogul. She had eyes that missed absolutely nothing and a heart encased in protective steel. Clara didn't approach me with sad, pitying eyes or condescending apologies. She unlocked my car door, handed me the coffee, and looked at my soaking wet clothes and the sketch pads full of architectural designs scattered across my passenger seat. "You look like you're calculating the exact velocity of your own rock bottom," Clara said, her voice dry as sandpaper. "Drink the coffee, and then come inside and grab a mop. I need a prep cook, and you need a paycheck." When my own parents looked at me, they saw a disposable liability. When Clara looked at me, she saw a terrifyingly sharp mind trapped in a desperate situation. She didn't just give me a hot meal. She gave me a small, uninsulated storage room above her cafe to sleep in and a lifeline. I took it, and I never looked back. What followed over the next 4 years was a punishing, relentless grind that pushed my mind and body to the absolute brink of human endurance. I wasn't just surviving, I was fighting a daily, silent war for my independence, desperate to prove that Arthur and Alina Sterling were wrong about me. My schedule was a suffocating loop of manual labor and intellectual obsession. I woke up at 3:30 a.m. every single day. From 4:00 a.m. to noon, I baked pastries and scrubbed the cafe floors. From 1:00 p.m. to 9:00 p.m., I worked at a massive commercial printing warehouse, doing mind-numbing data entry. I lived on a razor's edge of poverty. I couldn't afford to replace the clothes in my duffel bag, so I wore the same 3 faded t-shirts in rotation until the collars frayed and the fabric grew dangerously thin. When the soles of my cheap sneakers began to detach, I lined them with cardboard and duct taped them back together just to keep the freezing warehouse floors from numbing my toes. I lived entirely on cafe scraps and bulk bags of rice. But I didn't let the misery consume me. I weaponized it. Every time my eyelids drooped at midnight, I pictured my father shoving me into the rain and my mother screaming that family helps family as they stole my tuition. That memory was high-octane fuel. After the cafe closed, Clara and I would sit in a back booth until 2:00 a.m. while organizing her old business files to make extra cash. I noticed glaring inefficiencies in local commercial property management. Clara recognized my obsessive genius. She became the loving, fiercely protective mentor my mother never was. She taught me how to read a P&L statement like a crime scene, how to spot vulnerabilities in distressed properties, and how to negotiate with ruthless, emotionless precision. When I was 23, using a tiny pool of cash I had painfully scraped together from mopping floors, and a private loan Clara co-signed because she believed in me, I flipped my first distressed commercial space. The snowball effect was violent and magnificent. I utilized my background in design to transform abandoned warehouses and failing estates into elite, highly sought-after event spaces. Within 3 years, I had flipped a dozen properties. By the time I was 26, I formally incorporated my own holding company and purchased a sprawling, bankrupt historic property on the coast, transforming it into the crown jewel of my portfolio, the Magnolia Coastal Estate. By my 28th birthday, my luxury venue and hospitality empire was generating over $15 million in annual revenue. I was suddenly, quietly, staggeringly wealthy. One of my very first acts as CEO was buying Clara a stunning, paid-in-full beach house in Malibu for her retirement. The woman who handed me a cup of coffee when I was freezing to death in a parking lot was now a millionaire by proxy. That is how you treat your chosen family. But despite my life-altering success, I made a strict, unyielding decision. My biological family could never, ever know I existed. I legally structured my empire through a labyrinth of anonymous LLCs and proxy boards. My name was completely scrubbed from all public corporate registries. To the outside world, the owner of the Magnolia Coastal Estate was a faceless, untouchable corporate ghost. I kept my success entirely hidden because the digital ghosts of my past still haunted my periphery. Occasionally, I would check my brother Jason's public social media. It was a parade of unearned luxury, Rolex watches, VIP club tables, and leased sports cars. He claimed to be a crypto day trading genius, but Clara's financial training allowed me to see straight through the facade. I knew he was drowning in secret debt, and I knew my parents were quietly bleeding their own insurance firm dry just to maintain his illusion of wealth. I knew exactly what would happen if my parents discovered that the selfish parasite they kicked into a storm was suddenly a multimillionaire CEO. The hands that had violently shoved me away would instantly turn into open palms. They would invoke the toxic bond of blood to demand I bail out their failing golden child once again. So I chose to stay in the shadows. I wore bespoke tailored suits in boardrooms, yet remained a completely deleted file in my hometown. I found immense, grounding peace in my silence. My self-worth was no longer tied to their approval. It was secured in my offshore accounts, my brilliant legal team, and the unbreakable titanium spine I had forged from their betrayal. I was completely safe. I was untouchable. Or so I thought, until my venue director, Marcus, walked into my office one afternoon, dropped a wedding booking portfolio on my desk, and told me that a supposedly wealthy day trader named Jason Sterling had just rented the Magnolia Coastal estate for a $150,000 wedding. I opened the folder, saw my brother's signature on the bottom line, and realized the universe had just hand-delivered me the ultimate opportunity for an absolute reckoning. The moment the words, "I own it," left my lips in the bridal suite, the oxygen was completely sucked out of the room. My father's face went entirely slack, his jaw hanging open in a grotesque mask of shock. My mother looked like she had just been physically struck, and Jason, the golden child, let out a pathetic, high-pitched wheeze. But true narcissists don't just surrender when they are cornered, they double down on the delusion. Before Marcus, my venue director, could signal security to grab them, my father snapped out of his paralysis. He realized that if the venue shut down quietly, he would have to explain the humiliation to Jason's new in-laws, a highly prominent, old-money medical family from Boston who thought Jason was a multimillionaire. Arthur believed that if he could just get to the ballroom microphone, if he could publicly cement the narrative and force the wedding forward in front of 200 elite guests, he could trap me into keeping quiet. He violently shoved past the security guards and sprinted out of the suite, his heavy footsteps echoing down the marble hallway toward the grand ballroom. I didn't run after him. I didn't panic. I calmly smoothed the lapels of my tailored blazer, looked at Marcus, and said, "Cue the AV team. Put the financial ledgers on the main screens. It's time to cut the cake." When I walked out onto the landing of the grand, sweeping mahogany staircase that overlooked the ballroom, the scene below was breathtaking. The Magnolia Coastal estate was draped in thousands of white orchids and climbing ivy. 200 of the city's most elite socialites, surgeons, and old-money aristocrats were seated at tables adorned with crystal centerpieces. At the head table sat Jason's bride, Chloe, looking radiant in a custom Vera Wang gown, completely oblivious to the fact that her new husband was a broke, manipulative fraud. My father had practically sprinted to the stage. He snatched the microphone from the wedding singer, his chest heaving, sweat visibly beading on his forehead under the bright stage lights. He forced a wide, manic smile that didn't reach his terrified eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen, family and esteemed friends." Arthur's booming voice echoed through the massive ballroom, forcing the crowd to quiet down. "If I could have your attention for a toast." He raised a trembling glass of champagne. He looked directly at Chloe's wealthy parents sitting in the front row, desperate to maintain his leverage. "Tonight, we celebrate the union of two incredible families," my father declared, his voice swelling with unearned pride. "But I also want to take a moment to acknowledge my son, Jason. Many of you know him as a brilliant mind in the financial sector, a true prodigy in crypto trading. Just look around you." Arthur gestured grandly at the towering crystal chandeliers and the sprawling, opulent estate. He spared absolutely no expense tonight. This venue, this breathtaking estate, is a testament to Jason's unparalleled success and his dedication to providing his new bride with the absolute best life has to offer. He is the pride of the Sterling family. The crowd erupted into polite, enthusiastic applause. Chloe beamed, blowing a kiss to her new husband, who was currently cowering near the kitchen doors, looking like he was about to vomit. It was a masterclass in gaslighting and delusion. My father was literally using the multi-million-dollar empire I had built from the ashes of my homelessness to elevate the golden child who had put me there. It was time to pull the plug. I raised my hand, giving a subtle nod to my AV director in the sound booth. Instantly, the live string quartet's microphones were muted. My father's microphone let out a sharp, piercing screech of feedback that made the entire front row flinch. The massive digital projection screens behind the stage, which had been displaying a romantic slideshow of Jason and Chloe, suddenly went pitch black. Arthur tapped the microphone frantically. Just a minor technical difficulty. Folks, please. There is no technical difficulty, Arthur, my voice rang out, amplified by the wireless lapel microphone I had clipped to my blazer. The entire ballroom collectively gasped. 200 heads snapped upward, searching for the source of the voice, until their eyes landed on me, standing at the top of the grand staircase. The spotlight swung away from the stage and hit me directly. I slowly walked down the marble steps, my heels clicking methodically and authoritatively in the dead-silent room. And Jason didn't spare any expense, I added, stepping onto the main ballroom floor as the sea of tuxedos and designer gowns parted for me. Because Jason didn't actually pay for anything. Arthur physically backed away from the podium as I approached. "Riley, stop. Security, get this crazy woman out of here," he hissed, his voice cracking wildly. I stepped up onto the stage, ignoring him completely. I looked out at the sea of astonished faces, people who had been told by my parents that I was a troubled runaway who broke my family's heart. I looked directly at Chloe's horrified parents. "Good evening. My name is Riley Sterling," I introduced myself, my voice calm, leveled, and entirely devoid of fear. "For those of you who don't know me, I am Arthur and Aliner's daughter. But more importantly, I am the sole owner and CEO of the Magnolia Coastal Estate." A shocked murmur violently ripped through the crowd. Chloe stood up from the head table, her face draining of color. "My father just stood up here and told you a beautiful story about his son's brilliant success," I continued, projecting my voice to the furthest corners of the room. "But the truth is, Jason is not a financial prodigy. He is a fraud. For the last 4 years, he has been secretly drowning in debt, living entirely off my parents' drained retirement accounts to maintain the illusion of wealth." "Shut up. Turn her microphone off." My mother shrieked, running into the ballroom from the hallway, her face twisted in ugly panic. I pointed to the massive projection screens. On cue, my team displayed high-definition, unredacted images of the 3 cashier's checks Jason had submitted to the venue. Stamped across each one in thick, undeniable red ink were the words, "Returned insufficient funds." Jason booked my estate under a shell LLC, planning to bounce $150,000 worth of checks, assuming the venue would just absorb the loss to avoid ruining a wedding, I announced, the devastating truth echoing off the walls. "He is entirely, completely broke." Chloe let out a devastated sob. Her father, a prominent Boston surgeon, stood up, his face flushed with absolute fury, glaring at Jason. "8 years ago," I said, my voice hardening into steel as I turned to look my father dead in the eye, "my parents secretly emptied my bank account. They stole $22,000, money I made scrubbing diner floors, to bail Jason out of a drunk driving arrest. When I begged for my college fund back, they threw me out into a freezing rainstorm on my 20th birthday and told me I was no longer their daughter." The silence in the ballroom was deafening. The flawless illusion of the Sterling family had been utterly, permanently shattered. "They thought I would starve in the street," I whispered, the microphone picking up every lethal syllable. "Instead, I built an empire." "So no, Arthur. Family doesn't help family when family is a parasite. Effective immediately, this wedding is canceled. Security, escort these frauds off my property." For 10 agonizing seconds, the grand ballroom of the Magnolia Coastal Estate was trapped in a vacuum of absolute, suffocating silence. 200 of the city's most elite doctors, socialites, and old money aristocrats stared unblinking at the 20-foot-tall projection screens. The unredacted images of the 3 bounced cashier's checks, totaling $150,000, were displayed in high-definition glory. Stamped over Jason's forged signature in thick, undeniable red ink were the words that would end his life as he knew it: insufficient funds. The pristine, untouchable facade of the Sterling family wasn't just cracking, it was detonating in real time. Then, the chaos erupted. The silence shattered into a deafening roar of overlapping gasps, furious whispers, and outright shouts. Camera flashes from smartphones began to light up the room as guests instinctively started recording the spectacular downfall. At the head table, Chloe's father, Dr. Kensington, a highly prominent, fiercely protective Boston surgeon, stood up so fast his heavy oak chair crashed backward onto the floor. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He marched directly toward the stage, bypassing my terrified father, and grabbed Jason by the lapels of his custom tuxedo. "You told me you managed a $10 million crypto portfolio." Doctor Kensington roared, his voice cutting through the clamor of the ballroom. "You told my daughter you bought a house in the Hamptons. You bounced checks for her wedding." Jason, the untouchable golden child, suddenly looked incredibly small. The arrogant, charming frat boy vanished, instantly replaced by a cornered, petulant fraud. He held his hands up in a desperate, pathetic attempt to placate his furious father-in-law. "Dr. Kensington, please, it's a mistake." Jason stammered, his voice cracking into a high-pitched whine. "It's just a temporary liquidity issue. The market dipped. The bank froze my assets for a security check, that's all. Arthur, tell him." He looked toward our father for salvation, as he always had. But Arthur was completely paralyzed, staring at me in sheer terror. "It's not a liquidity issue, Jason," I interrupted, my voice projecting clearly from the wireless mic, cutting through his lies like a scythe. I didn't raise my tone. The truth is always loudest when spoken quietly. "I had my financial team run a background check on the Shell LLC you used to book my estate. You don't have a crypto portfolio. You have exactly $812 to your name. Your luxury sports car is leased under our parents' corporate insurance firm, and they have been secretly bleeding their own retirement accounts dry just to pay your minimum credit card balances." Jason physically stumbled backward as if I had struck him. Chloe, the beautiful, radiant bride, let out a guttural, devastating sob. She hiked up the skirt of her custom Vera Wang gown and stormed over to Jason. For a brief second, Jason reached out to her, expecting her to play the role of the devoted, supportive wife. Instead, Chloe pulled the massive, 3-carat diamond engagement ring off her finger. "You lied to me," she cried, her voice echoing with profound heartbreak and disgust. "You lied to me about everything. You aren't a genius. You're a broke, manipulative con artist." She threw the heavy diamond ring directly at his chest. It bounced off his lapel and clattered against the hardwood floor. "My uncle is a judge," Chloe spat, wiping her mascara-streaked eyes. "Since we haven't officially filed the marriage certificate yet, this wedding never happened. Don't you ever contact me again." Chloe turned and walked down the center aisle, her parents closely flanking her, leaving Jason entirely alone on the stage. In less than 3 minutes, the golden child had lost his fake wealth, his stolen prestige, his unearned title, and the woman he was supposed to marry. He sank to the carpeted steps of the stage, burying his face in his hands, weeping loudly and messily. As the ballroom began to empty, guests rushing to the exits to distance themselves from the radioactive fallout of the Sterling family, my parents finally broke. The reality of their complete social and financial destruction crashed over them. My mother, Alina, scrambled up the grand staircase, bypassing her weeping favorite son entirely, and practically threw herself at my feet. "Riley, please." Alina sobbed, her hands shaking violently as she reached out to grab my tailored blazer. I took a deliberate, disgusted step back, refusing to let her touch me. "Please, sweetie," she begged, real, hysterical tears ruining her expensive makeup. "You can't do this. We're your parents. We gave you life. If you press charges for the bounced checks, Jason will go to prison for fraud. It will ruin your father's business. We will be ruined." My father stood at the bottom of the stairs, his pride completely shattered. The arrogant patriarch who had violently shoved me into a freezing rainstorm was gone, replaced by a hollow, terrified shell. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with desperate panic. "Riley, I'm begging you," Arthur choked out, his voice a pathetic rasp. "I'm sorry." "I'm so sorry. I'll do anything. I'll give you equity in the firm. We can fix this. You have millions of dollars. You don't need to destroy us. Family helps family, right? Please find it in your heart to forgive us." I stood on the landing, looking down at the 3 of them, a weeping mother, a shattered father, and a ruined golden child. I felt absolutely no anger. I felt no pity. I just felt a profound, grounding sense of absolute closure. 8 years ago, I began, my voice dropping to a quiet, lethal register meant only for them. I sat on the concrete porch of your house, soaking wet in the freezing rain. I begged you not to steal the $22,000 I made scrubbing floors. I told you I had nothing. Eleanor flinched, squeezing her eyes shut. Arthur looked at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. Do you remember what you told me, Arthur? I asked. He didn't answer, just letting out a pathetic, shaking sob, so I answered for him. You told me that I was legally an adult. You threw a duffel bag into a puddle, and you told me I was no longer your daughter, I stated, repeating the exact words that had fueled my survival for nearly a decade. You threw me away because I was no longer financially useful to you. Well, today, you are no longer financially viable to me. You aren't my family. You are strangers who tried to defraud my company. I turned my back on them and looked at my venue director. Marcus, I said coldly, the police have been notified about the fraudulent checks. Have security escort these trespassers to the front gate to wait for the authorities. I walked away without looking back a single time. Behind me, the desperate, echoing sobs of my mother, the broken apologies of my father, and the pathetic wailing of my brother filled the empty ballroom. They had expected a desperate, weeping 20-year-old to simply vanish into the storm. Instead, they had forged a ruthless CEO who returned to legally, methodically, and permanently take absolutely everything they had. The morning after I canceled my brother's $150,000 wedding and ordered my own parents off my property, I didn't wake up feeling a fiery, chaotic sense of triumphant vengeance. I didn't pop a bottle of vintage champagne, and I didn't throw a lavish party to celebrate the absolute destruction of their flawless public image. When I opened my eyes in my coastal penthouse, listening to the rhythmic crashing of the ocean waves against the shoreline, the only thing I felt was a profound, unshakable, and absolute quiet. It was the kind of deep, grounding peace you only experience when a lifelong, suffocating weight has finally been permanently lifted off your chest. For the first 20 years of my life, my central nervous system had been hardwired to anticipate the chaotic, conditional love of my family. I was deeply conditioned to brace for my father's cruel, belittling dismissals, my mother's manipulative sneers, and my brother's manufactured, expensive emergencies. Even during the 8 years I spent building my hospitality empire in the shadows, a tiny, subconscious part of me was always bracing for the moment they would find out and try to tear me back down. But as I sat on my balcony that Sunday morning, sipping black coffee and watching the sunrise, there was absolutely nothing left to brace for. The monster wasn't hiding under the bed anymore. I had bought the house, evicted the monster, and changed the locks. Of course, a deeply narcissistic family structure doesn't just quietly accept defeat, pack up, and fade into the background. When the golden child is violently dethroned and the arrogant patriarch is stripped of his power, they inevitably resort to the only tactic they have left in their arsenal: weaponized guilt. By Tuesday morning, the brutal reality of the fallout had fully set in for them. Dr. Kensington, Chloe's father, had made good on his threats. He utilized his high society Boston connections to completely blackball my parents' insurance firm. Jason was officially facing felony fraud charges for writing bad checks to my corporate LLC. Their country club memberships were revoked, their credit lines were frozen, and the desperate, frantic attempts to breach my newly constructed walls began. My private cell phone number, a closely guarded secret I had kept hidden for nearly a decade, suddenly began blowing up with voicemails and text messages. They had clearly badgered my legal team and corporate receptionists until someone accidentally let it slip. First came the apologies from my mother. They weren't apologies for stealing my college fund or throwing me onto a freezing concrete porch, of course. They were apologies for the unfortunate miscommunications of the past. Eleanor left tearful, hysterical voicemails claiming that her blood pressure was dangerously high, that she was having heart palpitations, and that a mother and daughter should never be at war. She begged me to drop the fraud charges against Jason, promising we could figure out a way to integrate you back into the family. Then came the barrage of texts from Jason. Stripped of his leased luxury cars, his wealthy fiancée, and his fake day trader persona, the golden child suddenly remembered he had a sister. His messages were a frantic, pathetic mix of bargaining and manipulation. "Riley, I'm literally going to go to prison," he texted on Wednesday afternoon. "Chloe left me. Her dad is suing us for the wedding deposits. I have nothing. I know we had our differences when we were kids, but I'm your older brother. You have millions of dollars. You can't just leave me to rot. Please drop the charges. Let me come work for you at the Magnolia Estate. I'll manage the venue for you. I had to take the public bus today, Riley. Please." Finally, there were the flying monkeys, the extended aunts, uncles, and family friends who had gleefully ignored my existence for 8 years. They flooded my corporate inbox with long, preachy emails about the sanctity of family. They told me that I was being exceptionally cruel, that my father's legacy was destroyed, and that holding a grudge was toxic. "They are still your parents, Riley," one aunt wrote. "You have to forgive them to truly heal. Blood is thicker than water." Society constantly conditions us to believe that biology dictates an infinite capacity for forgiveness. We are taught from a young age that being the bigger person means allowing toxic people back into our lives simply because they share our DNA. We are told that an apology, even a desperate, legally motivated one, demands immediate absolution. We are pressured to forgive and forget, to keep the peace, and to absorb the pain so the family unit can pretend it isn't rotting from the inside out. I completely, fundamentally reject that narrative. I didn't block their numbers immediately. I didn't yell, scream, or type out furious, emotional paragraphs defending my actions. Engaging with toxicity only gives it oxygen, and I refused to breathe life back into their dying empire. My anger was gone. What remained was pure, cold titanium. Instead of an emotional confrontation, I had my lead attorney draft a strict, legally binding cease and desist order. It outlined, in cold, sterile corporate language, that Arthur, Eleanor, and Jason Sterling were legally barred from contacting me, my employees, or any subsidiaries of my hospitality group. Any attempt to bypass this boundary, whether by phone, email, or physical proximity, would result in immediate harassment charges and the aggressive prosecution of the outstanding $150,000 fraud case against Jason. I had a private courier deliver the documents directly to the front door of the sprawling suburban estate they were currently packing up in boxes. I didn't forgive them. I don't believe that true healing requires conventional forgiveness, especially when the people who broke you are only sorry because they finally lost control over you. Setting a strict, unyielding boundary is not an act of malice, and it is not an act of revenge. It is an act of survival. I didn't owe my mother a reunion dinner. I didn't owe Jason a management job at the venue he tried to scam. And I certainly didn't owe my father a second chance to ruin my life. When the courier called my office to confirm the legal documents were delivered and signed for, a final, massive shift occurred within my psyche. For the first 20 years of my life, my entire identity was wrapped up in trying to prove my worth to Arthur and Eleanor. Every early morning shift at the diner, every dollar I saved, every complex architectural model I built in Clara's freezing storage room was initially driven by a subconscious, desperate hope that one day I would be rich enough, successful enough, and powerful enough for them to finally look at me and say, "We are proud of you." But as I sat in my corner office on the top floor of my flagship property, looking out over the coastline I had conquered, I realized something incredibly liberating. I didn't want their pride. Their validation was utterly worthless to me. They were incompetent, cruel, and morally bankrupt people. Why would I ever need a seat at their dining table when I owned the entire estate? Why would I want the approval of a father who calculated my worth based on a college degree, or a mother who only loved the child she could brag about to her country club friends? My self-worth was no longer up for negotiation. It was forged in a freezing car in a strip mall parking lot, hammered into steel in the boardrooms of commercial real estate, and polished by the unwavering love of Clara, the mentor who actually chose me. I am completely, undeniably whole, just as I am. and I won't be there to catch them when they fall. I am finally, entirely free. Whenever a heavy, freezing rainstorm rolls into the Pacific Northwest, I don't feel that familiar, suffocating knot of panic in my chest anymore. I don't brace myself for the cold. I don't instinctively pull my coat tighter around my shoulders, and I certainly don't look back at the concrete porch where I was left to rot with nothing but a canvas duffel bag. Instead, I sit on the sun-drenched deck of a beautiful Malibu beach house, listening to the rhythmic crashing of the ocean, thousands of miles away from the storm. I sit there with Clara. We drink expensive coffee, we pore over commercial blueprints for my next acquisition, and we laugh. Clara doesn't share a single drop of my DNA. She wasn't there for my first steps, and she isn't in any of my childhood photo albums. But she is my mother in every single way that actually matters. She is the woman who looked at a freezing, broken 20-year-old girl sleeping in a strip mall parking lot and saw a CEO. She gave me a safe place to land when the people who brought me into this world threw me away like trash, and in return, I bought her a sanctuary. That is what true family does. They invest in you when your bank account balance is zero, not just when you hold the master key card to a multi-million-dollar estate. I am sharing this story with you today because I know exactly how agonizing it feels to carry the heavy, unearned label of the problem child, the scapegoat, or the disappointment. Society constantly bombards us with the deeply toxic narrative that family is an unbreakable, sacred bond. From the time we are children, we are conditioned to believe that blood is thicker than water. We are taught that we owe our parents our infinite patience, our unwavering loyalty, and our financial resources, simply because they provided us with the bare minimum of food and shelter. We are told that setting limits is somehow a selfish, unforgivable act, and that family helps family, even when that family is actively bleeding you dry. If you are watching this video, and you are currently shrinking yourself just to keep the peace in a toxic household, I need you to look at me and hear this clearly. You do not owe anyone your future just because they gave you your past. You do not owe your hard-earned life savings to a sibling who refuses to take accountability for their own crimes. You do not owe your sanity, your peace, or your success to parents who view you merely as a disposable line item on a budget. And you certainly do not owe your forgiveness to people who are only apologizing because they finally realized they can no longer control or profit from you. My parents spent my entire life assigning a dollar amount to my existence. They thought that true loyalty meant paying off a debt I never asked to incur. But Clara taught me that true love is never a transaction. Setting strict, unyielding boundaries is not an act of malice. It is not a dramatic tantrum, and it is not an act of revenge. It is an act of sheer, uncompromising survival. You simply cannot heal in the exact same environment that broke you. Sometimes, the most empowering, beautiful, and necessary thing you can do for your own soul is to stand up, walk out the door, and let the heavy lock click completely shut behind you. The cold shock of that independence might terrify you at first. It might make you feel entirely alone in the storm. But I promise you, that storm will forge you into something absolutely unbreakable. You have the power to build your own table, to choose your own family, and to define your own net worth. And once you realize that your value isn't tied to their validation, you become completely, terrifyingly unstoppable. My biological family had to learn that lesson the hard way. Today, Jason is working a minimum wage retail job, having completely lost his fiancée, his leased cars, and his pristine reputation, while actively paying off the massive legal restitution he owes my company to avoid a felony conviction. Arthur and Alina were forced to sell their pristine suburban McMansion and downsize to a modest apartment, their social standing utterly annihilated by the public spectacle of the canceled wedding. I don't wish them harm, but I also don't wish them well. I simply don't think about them at all. I am too busy living. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end of this journey. Reopening these dark chapters of my past wasn't easy, but keeping toxic family secrets hidden in the shadows only protects the people who put them there in the first place. If my story resonated with you, or if it reminded you of a situation you're currently fighting your way out of, I want you to know that you are not alone. Please go down to the comments section right now and share your story. The YouTube algorithm loves comments, but more importantly, this community needs to hear your voice. Tell me, what is the hardest boundary you've ever had to set with a toxic family member? And how did your life change after you finally walked away? I read every single comment, and sharing your absolute truth might be the exact push someone else needs to finally recognize their own self-worth and escape their own toxic situation. If this video helped you feel seen today, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to support what we do here. And if you want more stories about reclaiming your power, surviving betrayal, and building your own chosen family, check the description box below. There's another video waiting for you that I know you'll connect with just as deeply. Until next time, remember to protect your peace, know your worth, and never let anyone hand you less than you deserve. I'll see you in the next one.